Welcome. My name is Luc van Vught, and I will be your host for today. We have a panel discussion, so I will be your host, but I'm part of the panel, and I'm happy to have two experienced guys, Jon Long and Saurav Jani from Archerpoint, both working in their upgrade team, Jon being their director, and Saurav, the technical futurist. The goal of today is to talk about, and we will introduce a number of things about the preparation of upgrade to Business Central. So it's not the full upgrade process. Of course, you might have questions on that, but our main focus is to talk about the preparatory parts that needs to be done before you go into the upgrade. And one part is, and that will be Jon starting after this introduction to talk about license matters, because there are some important things to know about to plan what you're going to do. And there are some more technical parts which Saurav will discuss, and I will add a couple of things to that too. So welcome to this session. As always, we have a number of housekeeping rules. Your microphone is muted, and we keep it that way. We as panelists of today will be picking up your questions. Use in the GoToWebinar control the question window to post your questions, and either of us will pick it up. And well, we will rephrase them and answer it so everybody that attends this meeting is knowing about it. Hey, that was a little bit too quick. So apparently there is something happening there. I did not remove an animation apparently, but let's go quickly back. You can sign up to our YouTube channel, and this recording, one of the first questions of today was, will this recording be available? Yes, it will be available on YouTube. And I think on the recording, I make sure the slide is a little bit longer in view. If you want to be in the know of what's ahead, and the next slide will show you what is ahead, but there's always coming new webinars into our schedule. Register yourself to our newsletter. Here you find the URL. It's not too long, fortunately, but it's a bit not humanly readable almost, but you will find a link also on areopa.academy. On the first page we have there are two links, one to a newsletter for the training we once in a while organize, and the second one is the link to the newsletter of the webinars. So upcoming webinars, and you can find the list also on our website. We don't communicate the registration link directly. We always communicate our website to prevent, let's say, machine logic to access and register to our meetings. The next one in 2 weeks' time is by Tobias Fencer on automating and extending Azure DevOps. Tobias is one of our returning speakers. And then we're just over the year that we picked up the webinars from NAV Skills. Dimitri Katzen will have the honor to start, let's say, our new year after, well, that will be the 20th session since we started last July, Enums in Business Central. So be welcome to be part of that. And today we had quite a number of people registering. Looking at the control right now, we're over 80 people. So maybe one of you like to be want to have a certain topic or know somebody that wants to be a speaker on one of our next webinars. Feel free to let us know. We're always searching for topics and people that want to do that. So be welcome to do that. Now, almost the end of our introduction. Of course, ForNav is always helping us by providing the GoToWebinar platform, and we want to thank them to our sponsor in that way. So, Jon, it's going to be your part at the moment. So welcome to Jon Long, Director of Upgrades at Archerpoint. I think your microphone is turned on, so I will mute for now and leave the talking to you for a couple of slides. And if I'm too late in switching to the next slide, just, well, kick ass.
Okay. All right. Are you ready? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Jon.
All right, well, thanks for having me, Luke, and putting this together. I've been doing upgrades for couple decades now, and I love it. It seems to be changing all the time, and I love change, so perhaps that's why I'm so passionate about upgrades. And today we're going to be talking about licensing and preparatory work. We're not going to go through the technical challenges of upgrades, but we already have a bunch of really great questions, so thanks for the pre-questions, and feel free to ask questions as we go along. Since this is a panel style discussion, we welcome any questions that you have. I think I have about 5 slides to go through. These are pretty busy slides. I'm not a big fan of busy slides, but I figure since there's so many complexities and comprehensive deep dives into the policies that Microsoft has out right now with licensing and the changes with BC16, BC15, where AL is going away, I figured it'd be good to create these slides as kind of take-home slides so you can kind of get what I have to say today, but take them home and ponder them for later. So this right here was taken off Microsoft's website. It's their new lifecycle policy, and if you've been paying attention to Microsoft's promises in the past few years, they've followed through with their promises almost to the month with their release promises. So their new lifecycle policy is basically a 18-month kind of cadence with their releases. So you can see where BC14 was released in April 2019, BC15 6 months later, and BC16 6 months after that. And it just continues on with BC17, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't see wave 1 and 2 on here, but essentially every year, the unofficial version name of their major releases of Business Central are going to be called BC15, or I'm sorry, wave 1 and wave 2. So the spring release is wave 1 and the fall release is wave 2. You'll see the red line that represents the length of time that product is going to be supported. That's a little bit different than in the past where it was supported for 3 years. Now it's going to be supported for 12 months after the closure of the actual release period. The 6 months period is the period where you have time in on-prem or in SaaS to, from the time they actually release the product, you have time to kind of check it out in the sandbox until the window of release closure comes 6 months later. And then the 12-month support, it's just like the support that you've gotten for decades, and that is the monthly cumulative updates that Microsoft gives you and the hot fixes, etc. And you'll see with BC14, the tail of support goes all the way out to essentially the spring release of in 2023, which coincidentally also is the release of Business Central 23. So you have a long window of support on BC14. So you can look at that as perhaps a benefit or not. And I think you can go to the next slide.
Before we do, John, a question or actually a remark. So the 48 months of Business Central after the initial 6 months until Business Central 15 came out, that's one that's going to, let's say, put a constraint on how long you can support it, do an upgrade from through Business Central 14 to any AL version later.
Right. So you can, if you upgrade to BC14 now, even though BC16's out, maybe your ISVs aren't ready with their AL version. You can sit on BC14 and refactor your CAL to AL at your leisure while still getting support from Microsoft.
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to get at, Luke?
Yeah, that was, and that's I think important to all of us that to realize that okay, you can stick there for some time, but there's an end to it in support, and of course, it will urge you to move on at this point for sure.
Yeah, and then you can move on at your leisure to, if you're ready in April 21 with all your ISVs and all your customizations decoupled, you can upgrade then directly to BC 17 or BC 18.
Yeah,
And there'll be some subsequent slides that will clarify that.
I'll move it.
Okay, so this is the reality right now of all the Business Central versions, regardless of what version it is. These are the facts about it. From the SaaS cloud, which is the ultimate version that Microsoft is focusing 100% of their energy on, that's where they see all of us being. Perhaps it's taken a little bit longer than they thought, but that's their version of the future which exists now. All versions to the right, BC Azure, BC hosted, and BC on-prem, those are all on-prem versions of Business Central. The BC Azure just happens to use Azure VMs, Azure SQL Server, but it still is BC on-prem. It just happens to be BC on-prem in the cloud. BC hosted is essentially all your hardware is virtual in the cloud, rack space that's rented and treated just like a brick and mortar, but even though it's in the cloud, it's still Business Central on-prem in the cloud. And then the far right, that's the brick and mortar where you have your BC on-prem on premises, on hardware, perhaps it's on virtual machines, but it's on hardware in a brick and mortar building managed by employees of the customers typically. And I think that's pretty much it there. And here's another take-home slide. Sorry for the busyness, but I think it pretty much diagrams on a high level everything that exists in your environment. So that, let's just talk about the top ribbon there, the database and platform versions. That pretty much maps out everything under that. So your development environment, Cal goes away right at BC 15. Al started in 2018, but it didn't really mature until BC 14. And after BC 14, Al will be the only development environment in, well, it'll be the only language in Visual Studio. User type concurrent goes to named users in BC. Your available clients, your RTC client will go away at BC 15 along with Cal. From then on, you'll only have the web client. The web client has been around for quite a long time. So my advice in general is to start getting used to the web client if you haven't already, and for customers that are kind of resistant to go to the web client, they still have it available and it doesn't take long to turn it on, and it's available to them out of the box without cost. So I think it behooves them to at least start experimenting with it. And then your ISVs and your custom code, that just kind of points out the fact that you can have Cal in pre-BC versions, Cal NL. You can have partial Cal NL. You can have eventing, partial eventing. So you can refactor your code incrementally, or rip off the Band-Aid and go straight to Al. The Microsoft gives you all those options. Once you get to BC 15, it's expected that all your code be refactored to Al. Although there is a big asterisk here, which is actually a big flag and a big no-no. I would not recommend modifying Al, but on-prem, Microsoft still allows that. So after fall, when BC 14 is no longer available to add as keys to your license, if it's a new BC 17 license, if you have to modify base because you maybe have a .NET dependency, you'll have to modify base Al, but it's not recommended at all. So below are recommendations for specific scenarios, and that is because of the N2 policy. So let me just give you a brief overview of what the N2 policy is. The N2 policy is whatever version you're on minus 2. So right now we're on BC16, it's the latest version. BC16 minus 2 is 14. So right now BC14 is the oldest version of Business Central that you can purchase if you're purchasing BC16 new. So if you're upgrading from 2018 right now, you'll buy a BC16 license, you'll put BC14 keys on it and upgrade to BC14 or BC15 or BC16. Once you get to fall and you're on 2018 or below, or even on BC13, if you want to upgrade, you'll buy a BC17 license. And if you want to upgrade to BC17, that's fine, but you won't be able to you won't be able to buy BC14 keys. So that's an important distinction, because if you do have some reason to still go in a kind of a hybrid mode where you're doing some type of CAL, like let's say you're even all evented and all your ISVs are extended in extensions, but you have one really sticky interface to perhaps an old scale system where your entire warehouse uses a particular type of scale, and you're not ready to get new scales, then and you need CAL, then you have to be on BC14. So it would be best to buy a BC16 license before fall so that you can upgrade to BC14 and still use those scales. And there might be 100 different reasons, but if the bottom line is if you have to use CAL, BC14 is a good place to camp out so that you have that three-year tail of support, and you're also able to wait until all your CAL is in AL. You'll have this slide to kind of meditate on later. I think I touched on the important pieces, but fall is when BC17 comes out. The N2 policy goes into effect on BC17, and I believe you have 180 days after that comes out, but so before BC14 keys completely go away.
Yeah, but you have to take that into account, that BC14 is a stepping stone in your upgrade from CAL version to AL. And be sure then to, before the 1st of October, to have things in place to allow you to have the right license and do your work.
Yep.
I do have a question, by the way, John, or actually a remark from Martin Kuhn. As far as I know, he says you can also buy a subscription license for private cloud scenario. Is that different from what you had on one of the previous slides?
No, that actually is that's a great observation, and it is an option. If you buy a cloud, like let's say you get to December 2020, or even now, if you bought a BC cloud version of the license, then you can add the BC14 keys to it on prem. So it's kind of a workaround. There are some caveats. One being that it locks out your old license. So if you are on 2018 or below, and you buy a SaaS license, you can't add objects to it. So you need to know what you're doing. So I would bring that up if it would benefit your customer, or if you are a customer and you're worried about that, suggest it to your partner, but make sure that you know the caveats of that, because it will lock down your old license when you do that. So if you're not planning to upgrade till January 2021, for instance, and you know that you're not going to add objects, then that's a good option. In fact, the recommendations below, that those same scenarios apply to that, and it's a good workaround to extend further your ability to upgrade to BC14.
Clear. We had a question from Peter Huberger. Once the customer's license has been converted, migrated from NAV to BC, is it still possible to purchase extensions to old NAV license? Not yet a new user due to the long migration time. I think the answer is that given what you have described with the N-2, that there is a restriction to how far in time you still can add extensions to your old NAV license.
Not sure I understand the question. Sarah, did you understand the question?
Luke, can you repeat that?
Yeah, once the customer's license has been converted, migrated from NAV to BC, it's still possible to purchase extensions to the old NAV license.
So it's, yes, you can, but that's limited to 180 days. So the time that Microsoft gives you is 180 days. And in that time, you'll have both the licenses and you can order objects or users in the old license for 180 days. Yeah. And after that, it's not possible.
And the second question from Peter was also related to license. When does the offer apply to get 3 named users for one simultaneous user upon conversion to Business Central?
So it's actually was not a deal or a special offer to start with. Anytime you upgrade, you'll get 1:3. But it's based on the number of user license count that you had on October 1, 2018. If you added more users after that, they'll not be considered for 1:3 conversion. But if you had 10 users on October 1, 2018, you'll get 30 out of it. So that's not a time-bound offer. There is no end date for it. Let's put it this way.
There are more questions, but there's one question also just written down by Marouane. If we migrate 2016 license to BC16, can we still use the old 2016 license in other database for some reasons?
It's as in we checked with Microsoft. It's as per Microsoft. It's not possible to use a Business Central 16 license on a NAV environment or Dynamics NAV environment.
Old one.
But if you are, sorry.
But the old license.
Yeah. So the old license, yeah, you can use it. But yeah, that comes with the same limitation that you cannot add new stuff into that license.
Clear.
It locks it.
Yeah.
You can use it, but it's locked from being modified or added to.
So shall we move on for Sarah to pick up the next part?
Okay.
Yep, go to the next slide. Let's see. Yep, here we go.
So Sarah,
take it away.
It's yours.
Yes. Okay, thanks, Luke. So to start with, I wanted to talk about upgrade paths, as in this was one of the questions that was sent out as a pre-question, and that is there a possibility that I can upgrade from any version to Business Central SaaS? So this slide talks about that. So if you or your customer is currently on Business Central 16, 15, or any version of 14, there's a direct replication to Business Central SaaS. And if you would have attended the virtual event from Microsoft, they released that migration capabilities from 14.x to SaaS, but with no customs in CAL in 14 or 15 or 16 in AL. So Luke, can you click one more time and that'll tell us that there is one step from there to there. Let's come down, and if you are in 2016, 2017, 2018, Business Central 13 or NAV 2015, that adds one more intermediate step in your migration to upgrade to Business Central SaaS. So from 2015 and till BC 13, that's one step to go to Business Central 14, and then from there you can replicate your data to SaaS. So moving down in the queue, we have 2013 and 2013 R2 and 2009 SP1 and R2. From 2009 SP1 and R2, there's a direct upgrade path from Microsoft to 2015, and then you go up in the ladder. For 2013 and 2013 R2, you can always go to 2015, but what we have seen that it makes sense that instead of going to 2015, you actually take a detour and upgrade to 2018 and then follow the same upgrade path. So all these paths are kind of defined by Microsoft. Microsoft provides the upgrade toolkit from all these versions to the arrows that you are seeing to go to Business Central SaaS. If you are even before 2009 SP1, there is still a possibility from NAV 5 to 3.7 or NAV 4 to upgrade to 2009 and then follow up the ladder to Business Central SaaS. And then last but not least, and this is my minimum upgrade, so I don't know before this, but you can actually come from 2.6 to 4 and then follow up the ladder to SaaS. So the whole point is that you can actually upgrade from any Dynamics NAV / Business Central on-prem version to a SaaS online environment. And all these paths are available. You might have to take some other detours based on the ISVs that you are using, but this is a kind of a generic path for an upgrade from any NAV version to SaaS. So Luke, can we move ahead? So as John talked about why it's time critical based on N-2 policy to upgrade to Business Central 14 based on the information that we know today, and that should happen before October 2020. The code, as the slide says, other than the code merge, which is eventing and the data migration, there are some other preparation steps that you'll have to do for before your next upgrade to Business Central 15 or 16 or any other higher version. And those are, and we'll talk about these: prefix and suffix, application area tagging, users category, permissions, profiles, and user personalization. So let's look at them one by one. So look, can we move to prefix and suffix? So to start with, prefix and suffix, it's mandatory for an app development when you build an app for app source, but I would encourage and even recommend it to start using prefix and suffix on all your PTEs, which is pertinent extensions that you're building. Where it applies to each and every new field that you have added in the base table. Let's say you have added a field on sales header or on sales line, that prefix or suffix should be there. And on all new objects, either it's a report, page, or a code unit, or any other objects. And there is a reason why it is important. And the people who have done upgrades in past, you would remember that we used to add a posting date field into sales line or purchase line table in the older versions where it was not available. But when you actually upgrade to a higher version where Microsoft added that field, that used to cause conflict because of the same name. So with prefix and suffix, what you are actually doing is you are adding your initials so that if Microsoft or any other extension in future adds that same name field, it doesn't conflict and it doesn't causes you harm while you are trying to implement an extension or doing an upgrade or upgrading your app. So how we do it? Look, can we click once? You need to reach out to Microsoft as a partner and get your suffix or prefix registered. If you are a customer, you should always talk to a partner, ask them what prefix or suffix that they are using and follow the same so that your all the customizations are completely safe from any other changes that can be caused by Microsoft or ISVs. Now next is application area tagging, and application area tagging is it's applicable to anything which will be visible to the user on a client. So it represents a feature that system offers developers to control what users sees and what they don't. And if you remember, this was kind of released in NAV 2017, where you can define an application area on a field or an action or on a page, and based on what application area is tagged to, the user will two different users will see the same screen in a different view. Like on an item page, a warehouse user will see a different set of fields, whereas a person from sales will see a different set of fields in future, and that's based on application area tagging. Now this becomes important for our customs in base, because if you don't have an application area specified, then that field will not be visible, or that object will not be visible in the modern client. And look, can we click once? So you can actually set this in your Cal environment right now. If you are on Business Central 14, you can decide what application area is. The suggestion is to use #all, which means that this particular control or this particular object will be visible in any application area that is being set on the database. Can we customize it? Yes, we can, but you need to check the MSDN link where it's still under development. So there is a possibility, but I would not recommend to extend the application area functionality and add your own application area until unless it gets mature. So Luke, let's move to the next slide, which is about users category. Now, users category works in sync with application area tagging, and when these two properties are available, your object or your field becomes visible in the modern client. Relate users category as a menu item option, and look, if you click once, we'll see that screen on Dynamics Nav. So if you see the options on users category, they are similar to what you had in menu suite in Business Central 14 or Business Central 13, or I'm pretty sure till Nav 2018, that where you want to group your particular object. Like if I want to group this page under list, or is it a task or reports? So the similar option are also available on users category. And if a object have a users category and application area, then and only then the tell me feature in the modern client will be able to find that object and user will be able to access it. Okay, let's go next. And this is about permissions set and permissions. So in past, we had added our new permissions in permission table and permission sets, and we have also added custom permissions in Microsoft based permission set. If you are using Business Central 13 or 14, you'll understand it that from Business Central 13, there are two new tables that are being introduced, and once we'll click one more time, we'll see that picture. Two new tables are added. As you can see, they are called tenant permission set and tenant. So all your custom permissions that you need will be stored in tenant permission set and tenant permission. You will have no way to modify permissions in permission set, and the reason being that in future these tables, permissions and permission set, are not replicated to SaaS because they act as a common permission for all the tenants in SaaS, but your extension permission or your custom permission are actually stored in these tables, and they get replicated, or they are part of your extension, so they get moved to SaaS. So that's another pre-work or a preparation steps that you need to do in the Cal world before we start thinking about moving toward AL. Okay, second last, which is about profiles. So profiles being one of the feature that was heavily customized and used in the Windows client using the configuration mode and all. There is a possibility to add new profiles in Business Central 16. It was not there till Business Central 15, where you can actually configure a profile, but it doesn't support bringing the legacy data and updating it into the modern client because the schema doesn't match. A modern client structure is completely different from a role tailor client structure. So this is something that you'll have to work on once you upgrade to a modern client. Once you're in modern client, you can create those new profiles as you were doing in the Windows client. There is a config mode for that. But there is also a possibility to have your profiles as a part of code or your extension. And I prefer to keep it as code or extension. And the reason being that it allows you to move it between tenants. If you want to use the same profiles in multiple tenants, you can actually publish your extension which just contain those profiles set data. So that's a rework that you'll have to do once we move to the future with the modern client. And let's move to the last slide, which is about user personalization. Now, user personalization are again going through a hit like they were in when we switched from 2009 to the RTC, or from classic client to RTC. And once Luke click once, we'll see what that means. All the personalizations that you have done in the Windows client are kind of marked as legacy personalization in the modern client, and they stop you to personalize that particular page, which have a legacy personalization. So it will require rework. You'll have to delete all your legacy personalization and then create new personalization. There are again two ways to handle this in the modern client, which is user personalization or design mode extension. I prefer design mode extension because then it's actually getting saved as a code rather than a XML or the schema structure which gets stored in the user personalization. So that's it, I guess, Luke. I don't think there is any more slides for me.
Right, no slides for you. I don't see a straightforward question related to what you just said. I had a couple of slides also to discuss, just to make the broader picture clear, in the sense of these are the slides I used in my January, or part of the slides I used in my January webinar. You have to realize that let's say, where we're moving in the end is an app in the cloud, which has a system application, Microsoft base apps, and only per tenant or partner apps that implement customization on it. The thing, if you look at it from a license perspective, is that we need to move through, technically and a license perspective, that we all going to upgrade from CAL to AL via, let's say, the stepping stone 14 version, and then from there you will make the jump into a 16 on-prem, and from there you can move it into the cloud. And that's something you need to bear in mind, that these are, like in the slide where Sarah started with the whole collection of versions where you can come from, you need to take the eventual stepping stone on a NAV 14, or let's say Business Central 14, sorry, not NAV, where AL and CAL are still there together, and the preparatory steps, as Sarah pointed out, are going to happen at that point, surely. Eventually you need to do that before you can take any next step. Yes, so that one, to add a couple of things, but as Sarah, the steps that he was discussing is something you need to do before you can get and move into 14. And 14, you could, let's say, stick there for that period of 48 months. And from there, you start to refactor things. There are some things you could already pick up in your daily work, but they are not, let's say, needed to move to 14. But bear in mind that anything you change in your AL needs to be reverted, so that your footprint is going to be as minimal as possible before you can even move it into AL. So one thing you need to bear in mind also, if you go to a certain version, but let's say the May release cumulative update 12 on Business Central 14 does not allow you to move to Business Central 16.0, so let's say the RTM. If you move from 14 to 15 or 16, it has to be to a cumulative update from the same month. Yeah, so moving from 14.12 to 16.0 is not possible. For 14.12 to 16.1 is possible. That's something also you need to bear in mind. Anything you could take into account, but it's not mandatory to move to 14, but anything that you could already make only additive changes to SQL schema, so only have new tables, only have added field and not removed standard tables, not removed field from standard tables or whatever, will make the next step in your upgrade a bit easier. So I'll suggest Jon and Saurabh to pick up the questions from the Excel sheet first, and then step into any of the remaining questions we have from our attendees today. I've put everything into an Excel sheet, so I'll put that in view also, and I'll make it available somewhere also with all the other questions and answers, even though they're recorded. So some of the questions we already did tackle, but a first one was what I would love to hear more about our challenge and tricky parts of upgrading data in scenarios. NAV version 27, for example, 2017, with customizations to Business Central 16 on premise. And Saurav, you did put an answer there. There's something you want to elaborate on a little bit more here?
Yeah, so it's as in tricky parts from the upgrade side or from the data migration side is always the data, as the answer says there. And the reason being that data is different, and based on which area the system is customized and how much impact that area is going to be when you do your next upgrade. And that's where you can have a tricky part, or you may not have. So like, just to take an example, if you're not using item categories or product group code or approvals in NAV 2016, then an upgrade from 2016 to BC14 will have no problems, because that's the key area where majority of things changed. Product group code went away, item category became a parent-child relation, approvals are converted to workflow. So any customs and the data around that customization becomes tricky when you do an upgrade. From going to Business Central 16, as Luc already pointed out, you should always check the compatibility matrix before you upgrade, and this statement only applies from Business Central 14 and higher. So when you check Microsoft link, you'll see that, and there is a link, right, Luc, on the second one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to this link, you'll actually see that there is a compatibility matrix from which version of 14 you can actually go to this version of 16. So that may be one of the tricky part, that if you don't keep that in mind, you might have to restart your upgrade from Business Central 14 onwards only. So yeah, this is the compatibility matrix that
By the way,
is required for.
It was only mentioning 14.15 in the URL, but actually that was it's updated accordingly with new versions. So yeah, they had a wrong choice, I think, in naming this URL, but it is up to date with, as you can see, version 16.
Yeah.
There was one of the questions of Nikolai Topalov. Second question, what tools are best to use? And well, maybe you elaborate a little bit more on your answer there, Saurav.
Yeah, as in there are no specific tools. Microsoft Upgrade Toolkit takes care of everything that's in your database other than ISVs and add-on. So in our upgrades, we don't take any custom tools or custom processes to upgrade data. Microsoft Upgrade Toolkit does most of it, and then if our customer has ISVs or ISVs, then they have their own upgrade path, so they share their steps. So it's more or less standard. There are no custom tools that we have used.
Clear. Next question was actually, is there something that will help if you do something already in the old version? That was clearly, let's say, the focus of your part of the presentation. So that was already answered. The question from Ernst, we did discuss this before the session. The question on having an extensive multi-tenant database setup. Would it be converted into a single database in the cloud? And maybe, Saurav, you were elaborating on that in our preparation this today, but might you pick this up now also?
Yeah, so multi-tenancy, I looked at it once I read that question, and I was sure that Microsoft had a path for on-prem, and it's already defined on MSDN that how you actually upgrade a multi-tenant database from any version of NAV to Business Central 16. All the steps are there. But for the SaaS, there is no such information that is with me. So I'll not comment on that part for the SaaS part.
Yeah. And as a second part of Aaron's question was having a database with, let's say, as he put it, 500 plus companies. And John, you said, I've never had more than 55, imagining 500. But the system will handle that based upon the upgrade code units running through different companies. And yes, probably 500. How long did the upgrade for 55 companies take, John?
Well, it was pre-BC15, and pre-BC15 the upgrade toolkit is single company threaded, so to speak. So we just modified it in various places where you just do a change company so that you only have to push a couple buttons, and it runs the upgrade process through each company. So whether it's 1 or 500 companies, you only have to run one step, but in BC15 and above, the upgrade toolkit handles that automatically. So it doesn't matter how many companies you have.
Yeah, clear. Question from Peter, we did already answer. And then here, the questions from Gaurav, a couple of the first one has already been added to the slide deck. The questions following that, best practice while object or data upgrading and do's and don'ts. John, you were elaborating on that while we were discussing before we started the broadcast. Some elaboration on these 2 points, even though they're not explicit questions.
Yeah, just the answer actually is worded incorrectly. It's not often. It's actually not often. We don't often use SQL Direct Access. The only time we ever use SQL Server Direct is if we have to purge, say, a billion records out of posted document dimension table. It's a lot faster to just renumber the table and then do a truncate on the original data and then import the object back in. It only takes a couple minutes, but if you try to do using the upgrade toolkit, it takes, I've seen it take 50 days before to upgrade the dimensions, but rare instances do we not just use the standard upgrade toolkit or a augmentation to it.
Okay.
And the do's and don'ts, I guess I would need to know exactly where you mean. I could give you some do's and don'ts on every aspect of the upgrade, but in general, the best do's and don'ts are don't introduce new add-ons during an upgrade. People think it's a good time to introduce more change, but the upgrade itself is usually change enough for the customer. So to reduce disruption, it's best to keep it as simple as possible and just focus on just upgrading rather than introducing new stuff or removing functionality. You can always do that before or after the upgrade.
Clear. Next question, Sarah, you picked it already up in the slide or on the Excel sheet. Maybe you want to elaborate. Migration to SaaS, especially large databases, more than 80 gig.
Yeah, so it's possible, as in Microsoft has just released a new SKU, and there's a cost associated for it based on per GB per month. But as per the last update from Microsoft in last week, you can have any size of database on SaaS, and there's no limit per se to migration to SaaS.
Regarding custom extension upgrade, you might pick this up also.
Yes. So yeah, I didn't get the whole context of the question, but I tried explaining it in a way that I think the question was asked. Is that an extension upgrade process is also part of your extension. When you're building your extension, the version 2 of your extension, that should be part of your extension. And if nothing has been changed, you don't have to write your upgrade logic, but it's suggested to have your upgrade logic with your extension, and it gets executed during the Microsoft upgrade process. So there's nothing to be worried about extension upgrade. So if you haven't changed any schema or fields, or you're not moving data from a existing table to another table, then you may not need an upgrade routine. So it depends how your extension is written.
Yeah, and as there has been, but that is out of scope of this session. Those who have been part of the virtual event last week on Wednesday with on the AL VS Code update by Peter Boring. He also had a major part in that session on how data is upgraded by the platform. If you move tables, that was already handled by Business Central 15 platform, by the way. If you move tables out of the standard, let's say you have had a table in CAL and you move that to an extension, the platform will do the data migration for you. That also has now been extended on Business Central 16, that if you have fields in standard objects and you move that into an extension, which will, by the way, anyway, if it would be in the standard, also be in an AL extension for the base app, but the platform will handle a lot of things on that. It's out of scope of this session. My session on January did already discuss a part of that. Get your information there, or maybe suggest it as a next webinar if you want to get better informed on that one. I think that the next one relates a bit to that, Saraf, licensing implications due to moving customizations to extensions.
Yeah, so there is actually no impact on licensing for on-prem. As in on-prem, you'll still buy objects. They'll remain as it is. For table extensions and page extension, you don't have to buy a license because that's the way it was in the CAL environment. But for on SaaS, they are all free in the 50,000 to 99,000 range. So, but on-prem, you still have to buy those objects as you were doing in the past.
Yeah. As part of that, by the way, if you need to move, let's say, a customized table into an extension, which is not a per tenant extension, but would be something as an app source thing. My previous edition also applies to that. If you want to move from CAL into a newly numbered object into AL, make sure as a part of preparations that you do the renumbering on the CAL side. Don't do it on AL. That will be breaking changes, making it more difficult to handle in AL than it is in CAL. The last question that came around just before we started, and Saraf already did elaborate a little bit on that. We have a client question from Genius Danda on NAV 2017, where they are using two add-ons, a credit card one and a ZDocs one. So what steps and precautions we take care of from NAV to Business Central 16? And Saraf, you had some elaboration on that, which I wrote down.
Yeah. Right. So ZDoc, for a fact, I know is not yet completely ready with all their products that they have as an extension. There are one or two, I guess, they are still working on to create them as an extension. So, and I don't know which credit card add-on it is. If it's ChargeLogic, it's already available. So it depends on add-on, and you need to reach out to add-on partner to check their extension readiness. But as being discussed in this whole session, that's the reason that we are talking about upgrading to Business Central 14, because that gives you that time frame where you can actually wait. If you have customs around your extension, your add-on, they also need to be handled. So Business Central gives you that flexibility where even an add-on comes as an extension, you can still deploy it on BC14 and then do your custom extension in BC14 and then move it from there once everything is ready.
Yeah, clear. And that's also the reason with what John showed in the slides, and that there's a longer period of Business Central 14 support, because that will be really your major stepping stone. We're moving to the hour. We've got a couple of questions answered that people from the audience fed into the system. Let me pick out here. That's one from Temitopi, maybe I pronounce it wrongly. We have a customer who has purchased Dynamics NAV license years ago but could not implement. We engaged them recently and they want us to help upgrade their license to Dynamics Business Central and also not throwing away their initial investments in Dynamics NAV. There is not a, now I see it was a lot of text, but there's not a clear question phrase there. So if I would interpret this, what I think, can they still make use of that old license and moving them to a newer one, or can they still update that new license? John, maybe a question for you.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, well, it was not a full question, so I tried to interpret it, but in this case they have an end user that contacted them that had an old license purchased a couple of years ago, and they want them to start engaging with them again and get them to make their license to Dynamics Business Central. And not throw away their initial investments in Dynamics NAV. To what old license, to what version, let's say backwards, could you still make an upgrade to that Business Central?
Yeah, I see that now. Yeah, that I'm probably not an expert in answering that particular question. Maybe more of a sales person. Sorry, we might be able to help answer it, but I have seen it. There's creative ways to get around spending an exorbitant amount of money getting current if you have an older license that you didn't keep up with the maintenance payments. And I'm not qualified to answer that question, but I know that there's some workarounds to save some money to kind of preserve some of that original investment.
Okay, clear. We're at the hour. We have a questions left, but I will be picking up and share it with Jon and Saurav to provide an answer to that, and I'll see if I can find a way. We normally are not sharing documents or presentations or whatever, but it might be worthwhile to share the Excel sheet somehow. Maybe I put it on YouTube as a comment underneath the recording. Anyway, but thank you all for having been here. Jon and Saurav, thank you very much for being part of this session and doing your preps to do this. Anybody who wants to be in contact with us, you find here our YouTube channel name, but you can search it, of course. Newsletter URL is here also to allow you to subscribe to it. And I've added also our email address, webinars@areopa.academy, if you have any additional queries you want to contact you on, feel free to do that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with us so far. And we'll meet maybe in 2 weeks' time with the next session by Tobias Venster. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Luc.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.